Cloud. Recording. So unless my co-host Marion, thank you, Marion, thinks I'm not okay recording, I think we're good. And I see the pause button in case anybody wants. Okay. So, Cynthia, I think that you might have two tails. I know that you might have two tails that you have appetite that you have are able to tell. But since I know you haven't had dinner, would you like to at least tell one of them next?
Sure. Yeah, well, I'll just do the first, I'll do them in chronological order. And then I'd be glad to do them both at once, but if you want to loop around, that's fine too.
Ah, well, I'm not quite sure how long they are, so let's see how it goes.
Mhm. I want to tell you that cancer made my life worth living. Now, that seems kind of strange, and it might need a little context to get you started with that idea. See, we start with in early 2017, and at this point, I have failed dramatically at two careers. I'm struggling in my third, which is high school teaching, and I broke my ankle, and that I was in a wheelchair, and that led to even more difficulties. It's part of the reason that my fourth teaching job had fell apart, which means that by spring of 2018, I was not in very good shape. I was still hobbling around on this broken ankle. As far as I was concerned, my career was toast. But I was learning how to walk in very heavy, supportive shoes. And I finally bought myself a new pair of lightweight, bright purple shoes. In honor of Martha's story, bright purple shoes, which were to celebrate spring and the fact that I was learning to walk properly, except I wasn't. I was walking like this. I called it Igor. Yes, master. It's because my foot just didn't work properly. And I was doing a lot of stuff with Stagebridge at the time. I was doing my improv, I was doing my storytelling. But at the age of 55, 54, as far as could tell, my career was over. And frankly, I wasn't really sure whether I was a waste of oxygen or not. So all of this going on, I'm still a scientist. And when I started getting shooting pains in my left hip, well, I figured it was because of the lurching from the ankle, right? So I was working with my podiatrist, and we had various x-rays planned. And just in case, I went to see my GP at the same time, and she said, let's x-ray the foot, let's x-ray the knee, let's x-ray the hip, and just to rule out worst case scenario, let's do an MRI on your back. And I almost didn't do the MRI. My husband was with me. He needed to get back to work. I was feeling guilty, but they happened to have a slot, so we stayed. Which is how it came to be at 3:00 in the afternoon of May 29th, 2018, I got a phone call. Cynthia, are you sitting down? I am now. It's your doctor. It looks like cancer. You need to pack a bag. You need to come to the ER. We're going to check you into the hospital for some tests. Now, everyone who's heard this story tells me it's really important that I give you time to soak that in. But see, I didn't give myself time to soak it in. I didn't want to take the time to be afraid. I just launched right into, I know what to do now. I'm going to pack a bag. I'm going to pack my stuffed rabbit and my Kindle because I can't go anywhere without them. And I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it. And I'm just going to run at this thing because I got this, I can do this, right? And things went actually quite well at the hospital. I had to have a variety of tests done. I was in for a few days, but I quickly realized it was really important to me to own this hospital experience in some good way. The rooms at Kaiser all have beautiful views. They're single rooms. And so the first thing I did was I made sure that my IV rack was never on the side where the window was. So I could have one side that was beautiful and gorgeous and one side that was all full of things that beeped and clanked and, measured stuff. And I made my husband go and buy me some yarn so I could knit. And I started thinking that these ideas I were having were actually pretty useful, and maybe I should write them down in case they'd be useful to someone else. Now, at the time I left the hospital for the first time, we had done one test a CAT scan, which determined that although the cancer was in my spine, I have a plasma tumor which had eaten out my entire L4 vertebra. It had not apparently come from anywhere else. The CAT scan revealed no other tumors or problems in my body. And they took some blood marrow out of my hip, bone marrow out of my hip. And that was going to determine whether the cancer had spread to anywhere else. Hadn't come from anywhere else, might still have gone to somewhere else. And that's where I left the hospital, not quite sure yet whether I was in for life or a life sentence. Well, I focused on everything else, all the logistics surrounding it. They gave me all sorts of meds. Now, I told you I'm a scientist, but medical terminology, forget it. The Cytohura, Lareza, who's it? So I figured I need to get my medicines organized. I need to get nail polish. I need to put dabs of nail polish representing what the different things are for. And so I created what I call the healing hands manicure. My pinky finger was pink. Well, I didn't actually have love in a bottle, but I knew I needed to have love around me. This finger, pink. My brain froze. Purple, pale lavender for relaxation. I had muscle relaxants. Blue for serenity. That was for the steroids that were calming a lot of the violent stuff that was happening in my body. Green for the painkillers, opiates, I didn't want to take them. And yellow for joy. So green was for health, yellow was for joy. It was the antidepressants I was already on. And I soon discovered an amazing thing. The love and the joy were not really happening, that were taking care of themselves. I didn't need the muscle relaxants, and I didn't need the painkillers. Ha! Back to you, cancer! Remember that finger, because it's going to come back. I knew right away that I needed to gather healing energy around myself. I needed to get my improv friends to do healing improv. I needed to get my story friends to tell healing stories. And I needed to go to church and I needed to pray. Now, we're Presbyterians with kind of a leaning towards Unitarian. Calm down, oh, to heal this child. It's not our thing. I really wished it were. But I went and I asked him to do a laying on of hands. And everybody in the church gathered around while the pastor was saying rather boring things about praying for discernment among the doctors. There was this love that was coming into me from all directions. And a woman in the balcony watching it just felt this whoosh of positive energy. And shortly after that first church visit, I did get the word that the cancer was completely local. It had eaten an entire vertebra, but there was no trace of it anywhere else in my body. Completely localized, completely curable. Some radiation, a surgery, I didn't even need chemo. I wasn't even going to lose my hair. So it was pretty exciting. And that led me into my second hospitalization, during which I was still putting together my ideas about what I wanted to share. You know, what was I learning about transferring from a bed to an MRI machine? It's a horrible experience. And I quickly, I thought of some ways to improve that. And the surgery went really well. They sent me home just 4 days later. There was some frustration involving someone who wanted to put me in a nursing home because I wasn't meeting his targets. I said, well, I met his targets. I got out of there. And I was actually feeling great. In fact, I was feeling so great that I kept putting all these ideas together, and I started thinking about it in terms of all sorts of different things I'd learned. And I'd be lying awake at night, and I was writing, 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 and writing, and writing. And then there was an ambulance at my door. They tell me it took me 45 minutes to get into the ambulance because I didn't know that I had gone mad. Remember that middle finger? The steroids, in a modest proportion of the society, they cause mania. When it happened to me, I spent a week in the psych ward. When it happens to our very soon to be ex-president, he went down on the White House balcony and started spouting BS. I don't remember what was happening on the outside in the psych ward. Apparently, it was extremely unpleasant. I remember what was happening on the inside. I started being visited by the avatars representing my joy and relaxation and serenity and healing and love. And at some point, we were communicating like ever more information, ever smaller chunks, until the whole universe kind of collapsed to this single point. And for one eternal instant, I thought I had died. But I seemed to still be there, so I started playing little math games in my head with 1 and 0 and infinity, and managed to untangle this mess and came back to my husband, who had been afraid that I might never be myself again. This was scarier than the cancer, the madness. But I did come back, and we had my party. I gathered my storytellers and my improv people and my church people around my house, and we made a joyful noise unto the Lord, and it was marvelous. And I don't remember a thing. Still kind of wonked out while it was happening. A year later, I hosted another party, which I do remember, thank you very much. And a year after that, I got a new teaching position with a wonderful principal. I've now held that teaching position for 2 years, and it's going beautifully. And now I have been counseling my students who are going through crisis and using some of the things I learned in the hospital. And I've even gotten around to printing up those idea cards. After all, we got this.
Thank goodness.
Now, if it's convenient, I would love to tell Go Mommy Go because it has a similar symmetry, but if you need to move on, that's okay too.
Well, I don't know how long it is, and there was something I had forgotten to ask, but I'm not remembering it now.
That's all right. Just put me in the queue.
Cynthia, would you? I mean, feel free to go get yourself a little snack, and we could get the next people.
Yeah, you guys
then-
carry on, and when food happens, I'll just bring it in here.
Oh, okay, that sounds good. Is it Terry or Anne who wanted next? I don't remember.
They did have their hands up.
Oh, well, I know everyone has a tail. Maybe Marion doesn't, and I have a tail. My tail is not one that I want to end with, but it doesn't need to go next. My
I
tail
do
has a
have
joy.
one. Doesn't have to be now, but yeah, I will have one
Good.
later in your group.
Great. So who would like to be next? Unless we want to let, okay. Thank you, Anne.
Andrew, you just go get a plate of whatever for me.
Not terribly. It's a folk tale from China, and it has in the story a discussion of the phrase having a green thumb. So I'm assuming I'm not telling to children tonight. So I'm assuming you all know what a green thumb is. I wish I had one. But there was once in ancient China a young boy whose name was Ping. So maybe a lot of you will know this story. It's been around for a long time. And he loved growing things. He was very successful. And his parents were always very encouraging. And they'd say, "Oh, Ping, anything you plant, a flower or a big plant or even a tree will grow because you have a green thumb." And of course, that made Ping very, very happy. He was glad his parents were happy with his gift. Now, there was also in this area a very wealthy and influential mandarin, and he had a wonderful garden. It was famous, and what was a little unusual was that he never hired anybody to work in the garden because he insisted that he would do it all himself. And he was very successful. He used to give tours through it. And it was a place that everybody in the whole area would like to go and admire. But he realized that he was getting on in years, and he was going to have to do something about keeping up this beautiful garden when he wasn't able to. Decided that he needed to get a master gardener to replace him in the gardening world. So he got his advisors together, and he said, okay, I want you to go to the four corners of our kingdom, and I want you to search out people who would like to come and compete to be my master garden. So they did that, and they ran out to look for all people who were famous with their growing. And of course, Ping was already well known. So of course, he was one of the people who was chosen. He was very excited. And the day that he was supposed to arrive, all the contestants were to arrive at the at the palace the first day of spring. So the first day of spring arrived, and he got all dressed up in his very best clothes, and he went. And there was a lot of other people there, all different ages, and he was standing there, and the Mandarin came out, and he said, "Now I'm going to give each of you." That was the gong to announce the Mandarin. I'm going to give each of you a seed, and you can do with it what you want, but I want you to come back a year from today, next first day of spring, and bring me what you have done. And I hope you will have done your best. Well, Ping was so excited. He went home, and he immediately got some good, rich dirt and filled the little pot that he found in his backyard. And he very carefully, delicately planted the little seed, and he fertilized it. And every day he got up and watered it and made just the right amount of sunshine on it. And he attended to it every day after day after day. And he noticed that it didn't seem to be doing anything. So he got a bigger pot, and he got a richer soil. In fact, he actually traveled out to the local river and got fresh river water to water it, and kind of adjusted where it was sitting so that it would get perfect sunlight. And the days went on, and nothing seemed to be growing. And his parents got concerned. They said, well, Ping, you've always shown such great aptitude for growing things. Have you lost your green thumb? And Ping, of course, was very unhappy. He was devastated, thinking for the first time in his life he was actually a failure at growing something. But he kept attending to this, and the days and the months went by, and before he knew it, the year was up, and it was the first day of spring again. And all the people who had been growing went back and arrived at the Mandarin's palace. And there were people there who were growing beautiful flowers and trees even. And there was Ping with his empty pot. And the gong was going to play to announce the Mandarin. And the Mandarin came out, and he said, all right, everyone has had your seed growing in your pot. I'm going to look them all over. And he started to walk down the line, and Ping noticed that he didn't look terribly happy. He looked quite closely at everybody's pot, but he was frowning. And eventually he got to the very end of the line, which is where Ping was, and he looked at the pot. Why are you bringing me an empty pot? Oh, Mandarin, I am so ashamed. I'm so sorry. I used all the best soil, and I went all the way to the river for the water, and I tended it every single day, and I don't know why it didn't grow. I did my very best. This is my new master gardener. Everybody was astonished. This was his new gardener? This young boy? You see, I see lots of beautiful plants here. But where you got your seeds, I'll never know. The seeds I gave everyone had been cooked and so were impossible to grow. I needed a master gardener who not only was good at growing beautiful things, but also had honesty and integrity. It took a lot of courage for Ping to bring an empty pot to me today. But I am happy to make him my master gardener. Ping, come along with me. Let's go in and see what we can do in the garden together. And the people were left with their mouths open. But you know, at the following first day of spring, people were there looking at what had grown. And there were the most magnificent flowers, plants, and trees growing. And so they all knew that Ping very much still had his green thumb. Thank you. I need to get some water.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you.
Anne.
Thank you, Anne.
Man,
Wow. Mid-tail, I did remember it from the festival, except that it wasn't villagers, it was sons, 3 of them. So maybe that's a different tale.
Tails are changed to suit the time. Lovely. I love that.
So wise, says Bobby.
Yeah.
Let's see. If Terry, I don't know if Terry wanted to go next or if Ed or Marion does.
I will go next if you want me to, Linda.
go ahead.
Okay.
It's teller's choice.
All right.
So yours is a personal story.
Mine is a personal story. I had the good fortune of having had 4 uncles in my life, and I loved each one of them dearly, and each one of them had a major influence on me as I was growing up, not the least of which was my Uncle Neil. This story comes from a letter that I wrote to his wife, Aunt Lola, the day after he passed away. February 4th, 1995. Dearest Lola, yesterday I drove from Tucson, Arizona to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Over 400 miles of almost nothing but barren desert, the horizon broken only by occasional renegade outcroppings of rocks and barn-sized boulders etched against a crystal blue sky. With a mellow tape in the deck and a clear road ahead, it was a perfect place and time for reflection. And of course, my Uncle Neil was in my thoughts. Many memories of him came flooding back to me, but driving as I was at that moment caused me to jump to one of them ahead of all the others. It was the occasion when we were first able to bond together, one-on-one as uncle and nephew. I was probably about 10 years old and very impressionable, and I was given the opportunity of driving with him on a trip from Sanibel Island, Florida, to Black Mountain, North Carolina. Driving with him in his pride and joy, his brand new bright green Hudson 1947 Hudson Hornet. With my mom and dad in their car and my Uncle Neil and I in his Hudson, we all left the island at the same time, and we're soon on the road heading to Jacksonville. I watched the speedometer climb as Uncle Neil shifted expertly through the first 3 gears, and then he shifted into a 4th one which I'd never seen on any car that my parents had ever owned, and our speed increased to a steady 70 miles per hour as we sped along the narrow 2-lane asphalt highway. We whizzed by other cars on a blur, and the engine seemed to hum and purr even more smoothly as the speed increased. And my parents' car soon fell far behind and eventually disappeared altogether in the rearview mirror. I was keenly aware of the pleasure that my Uncle Neil was experiencing at that moment. I think it was as much about showing his young wide-eyed nephew his special automobile that he owned, and as it was from the pride of that Hudson Hornet being the fastest form of automobile transportation known to man at that time, a fact which he took great care and to educate me about. I was fascinated by all the buttons and knobs and dials on the dash, so I saw one with a red dot on it, and I reached out for it with my hand. "Stop!" Uncle Neil shouted, "Don't touch that knob, ever!" I withdrew my hand and sat there chastened, thoroughly convinced that I'd almost done something horrific, something that surely would have thrown us off the highway and ruined the prized engine of his Hornet. Something bad was going to happen if I touched that knob. Maybe we'd go careening off into those ditches where there were alligators and water moccasins. It was fearful. And he let me sit there for a long time uncomfortably. And then he looked at me with a totally deadpan face. And in a very serious and somber tones, he said, "We don't have flight clearance from the tower. We're only cleared for road travel on this trip. If you pull that knob, airfoils project from the side of this chassis, and this car transforms into what the FAA classifies as an airplane. Now, with the foils extended, we would lift off the road approximately 10 to 12 feet. Our speed would reach the top of the speedometer. You see it right there, 140 miles per hour. And we'd arrive in Black Mountain long before your father and mother ever got out of the state of Florida." I thought about that for a long moment, and I must have looked at him somewhat dubiously because he added, "You don't think I would just drive any car, do you, Terry? That I'd be content with a car just because it has the most powerful engine ever built? The first car with overdrive, with aerodynamic design? This isn't just any automobile, Terry. This is a Hudson Hornet. And Hornets fly, don't they?" He was so adamant and impassioned in his argument that my skepticism vanished instantly, and I no longer doubted that flying in a car was indeed well within the reach of possibility. It was a brilliant strategy on his part. Any chance of my reverting to the stereotypical pesky little kid constantly whining and asking when we'd get to our destination was eliminated. The long trip from Florida to North Carolina was made shorter, I'm sure for both of us, by my constant fascination with that red knob and the idea that at any moment we could leave the ground and soar above all the ordinary and mundane traffic below. The hours and the miles literally flew by. I have another memory of my Uncle Neil and his Hornet. When I was about 12 years old, he allowed me to drive that car around the grounds of my great Aunt Lil's estate in Black Mountain. I toured the many twisty gravel roads of her 80-acre property alone by myself, feet barely able to reach the pedals, head barely above the dash. My very first automobile solo, and I did so with great care, precision, and pride, never taking it out of second gear. And even though there was rarely any traffic on those private roads, I always came to a cautious full stop at every intersection. I was the pilot, solely in command of my car/aircraft. And I'm pretty sure I know what you're all thinking right now, and I admit I was sorely tempted, but I never once touched that red knob. Even today, I often wondered what that red knob actually did. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Wow, Uncle Neil.
My Uncle
Do
Neil.
you sound as much like him as you must sound like him?
Well, I don't know if I do that. That's some years ago, but I had some wonderful uncles in my life, and I have lots of stories about them. So I'm glad to tell that one. The story, I have more to that story, goes on about how I was playing golf with him and fishing and all that kind of thing. But That's a little short synopsis of what he was like. He was a master storyteller himself, and he loved tall tales and exaggerations, and yeah, tried to give me a nickname because I only have a first name and a last name. And he was exploring rivers down in Brazil that tributaries of the Amazon, uh, researching these indigenous tribes back in the jungle. And when I was born, my parents sent him a telegraph, and he got it, and he said, "He has no middle name. I think you should give him the name of this river I'm exploring. It's called the Rupununi River." Well, Terry Rupununi Stokes was going to be my name. I objected, and it didn't last. So thank you very much, guys.
But you remembered Rupanuni. Wait,
Rupanuni.
Rupanuni. Go, Terry.
I'd like to
Um,
go next.
Cynthia, can you wait for Ed to go next? Okay, cool. Take it away, Ed.
Right. There once was an old woman whose eyes were dim, her ears dull of hearing, and her mind wandered to places only she was familiar with. Her relatives would often find her hitchhiking naked down the road at the age of 90 along the Klamath River, just south of Happy Camp, California, which is just south of the Oregon border. She'd be walking over jagged cliffs, cut her feet. She'd be speaking languages that only she understood. Her daughter and son-in-law were getting increasingly disturbed by her behavior, and they eventually realized that they couldn't care for her any longer. So they checked in with the rest of the family, the aunts and uncles that were up in the Seattle area. And they said, just put the old coot in a rest home up north of Seattle where she grew up, and, she'll be fine. They really saw her as a family embarrassment. And back in the 60s, people did not know much about this disease called Alzheimer's, which is what she had. So they made that recommendation. Now, I, on the other hand, saw my grandma as a wise, loving person. And I remembered her as a young child. She would walk me down to the bedroom at night. She'd open the door and she'd have me stand right on the edge. And then she'd go in, and with her magic powers, she would slay all the dragons and alligators that were underneath the bed. She'd come back, pick me up, tuck me in bed, and then tell me stories of fanciful and faraway places. And I was transported. And I think I began my storytelling interest at that particular time. She would also, once the story was finished, she would sing my favorite lullaby. Many of you know it. And if you know it, sing along or hum along with me. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Grandma's gonna buy you a mockingbird. And if that mockingbird won't sing, Grandma's gonna buy you a diamond ring. And if that diamond ring turns brass, Grandma's gonna buy you a looking glass. And by that time, my eyes were closed and I could just hear her out in the distance. She would reach over, gently kiss my cheek, and I would listen to the pitter patter of the rain falling on the roof up in Seattle, Washington, most every night. It was a great memory that I had. Well, the family did put her in a rest home. And unfortunately, it was a dirty, cheap, rundown, understaffed place. And a couple months after she was there, it was about 18 and a half, I visited her at the restaurant. They ushered us into this small family room. It had tables. I think it was also where people ate. It was dark. There weren't any pictures on the wall. There was a TV over in the corner. It was very uncomfortable. At this point, my grandmother didn't recognize anybody. She did know who I was. But she began talking. And then as she talked, her eyes glazed over and she looked up into the ceiling. And I don't know where her mind went, but they went to very interesting places that I mostly couldn't follow. But I still was transported back to the sound of that voice as a young child. It seemed like an hour or two went by, and all of a sudden, she looked down. She looked deeply into my soul. Her eyes cleared up, and she said, Eddie, don't ever put your parents in a death camp like this. This is no place for the living, and I won't be living much longer. Her eyes glazed over. She looked at the ceiling, and she began her journey to wherever her mind happened to go. 2 weeks later, Grandma Sadie passed away peacefully in her sleep. The family had an almost hushed, kind of guilt-ridden funeral for her. And that was it. Very seldom did people go and visit her. But I remembered the many lessons that my grandmother had taught me. And in 2012, my father came down with Alzheimer's. My mother tried to care for him, but he had lost his short-term memory. His long-term memory was fine, but he would hide things at night, like a wallet, a comb, a boot. And when he couldn't find them in the morning, he would go into a rage. And the last straw for my mother came when he grabbed her and threw her against the wall and said, you know where my boot is. You go find my boot. I think those Mexican gardeners stole that boot. You go find that right now. So we found an assisted living home close by in Santa Rosa, California, where she could visit him every day. And it was clean, it was well staffed, it was an excellent facility. The only problem was he still had those bursts of rage when he couldn't find his home. And he'd take it out on the help that came in, or he'd come down to the desk and scream at people. Well, this went on for about 1 year. And then at that point, he had completely lost his short-term memory. Again, his long-term memory was fine. I heard all the family stories many times. They finally said, he can't be in our regular community here. We're going to have to put him in the lockdown ward. And at that point, I went, you know what, Mom, let me take care of him. I'll bring him to Davis, which was about 80 miles away. You probably know that. And I'll take care of him. So for the next 3 years, my son moved in for 1 year and helped care for him during the day before he went away to college. My ex-wife took care of him during the day while I was working for the next year and a half. And the last 6 months, when he needed hospice care, then we had hospice workers come in, and I had quit work by that particular time. My son had a great idea, though. When he had a dog, a Yorkshire Terrier, he said, you know what, let's get Papa a rescue dog. That'd be a good thing for him to have. So we found a rescue dog, and it happened to be a Yorkshire Terrier. And when we asked my father what he wanted to call the dog, he said, Susie, which was the name of his Yorkshire Terrier. But he didn't remember his old dog. We would visit my mother every weekend, and if he remembered my mother and family members, he didn't remember my ex-wife. He remembered my son, and he remembered some of his old friends that he worked with, and we could take him up to the Seattle area, and he could meet with them, and they'd talk about all the old times. And we figured out how to handle his rage, because early in the morning, we'd get up, and he'd tell us what was missing, and we'd find it right away, because he was just, so his rage didn't get very far. But once we got that dog, he would take the dog out for a walk, because he was in good physical shape. And we got a pattern where he could go about 6 blocks and come back. And then I put 2 scarecrows in the front, by the front door, so he would know where to come back to. And the dog was so smart. The dog would look at him after the first walk, maybe an hour later, and look at my dad and go, my dad would go, oh, hey, Susie, oh, you want to go for a walk? And he'd take the dog out for a walk. He went probably 10 times a day on a walk. It was good exercise. All the neighbors got to know him well. Didn't remember them, but he told them the same stories. And they all knew about him. Well, it was about 2.5 years when he eventually passed. And when he passed, my son and I dressed him in his finest suit. We combed his hair. We held his hands in the bed. And we sang him the song that his mother used to sing to him when he was a young boy. Please join me. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. And if that mockingbird won't sing, Mama's gonna buy you a diamond ring. And if that diamond ring turns brass, Mama's gonna buy you a looking glass. And as we held his hands, he took his last breath and left us. And all I could think of was the love that I had for my father and my grandma Sadie. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Wow. This is a memory night. My. We've got folk tales and family tales and long memory tales of short memories, short-term memories. Wow. Moving along, I think that, my gosh, it's after almost 8 o'clock. Bobby, would you be okay if, and everyone else, if Cynthia goes next, if you're ready, Cynthia?
Yeah, sure. I've been, problem is after I eat, I always cough a lot. It was, I believe, 1967. I was 3 years old. I was riding on the front of my mom's bicycle on the road between Woods Hole and Falmouth, Massachusetts. If you know the area, there's a bike trail now, but in the 60s, there was this road that went up a hill past a lighthouse with a very loud foghorn and then down the hill on the other side. And we paused, my mom and I, at the bottom of that hill, waiting for that foghorn because it was loud. I didn't want to hear it. And the foghorn went and I yelled, "Go, mommy, go, go, go." And she pedaled hell-bent for leather up that hill and down the other side so that we were clear before that foghorn could blare again. This extraordinary energy, physical, intellectual, and emotional, characterized my mom's life. She and my father met folk dancing in a ski lodge. During their courtship, she worked in Germany with the American Army and learned wood carving from a Nazi. And she and my father, on their honeymoon, they went rock climbing. Shortly thereafter, my father finished up his doctorate. My mom, who had originally thought she was going to be a secretary, my dad encouraged her. She became a doctor of social welfare, which eventually turned into a PhD. And she also took up ceramic sculpture, which she'd started learning from the Nazi woodcarver in Germany. And so I came into this house that was just boiling with excitement, intellectual things happening, creative things happening, physical things happening. Mom took up running around our neighborhood, presumably to work off the baby-related fat. And where I live, 1 block is a mile. And it starts the 200-foot vertical climb and then loops around like that. And Mom did this run every day for as long as I lived. And eventually she stretched into the local park. So it was about 2.5 miles. And then as she got older, she compressed it a little bit down to a mere 1.5 miles, still starting with that 200-foot vertical climb. I'm going to smallify for a second. Boop. Here we go. I wanted to tell you other things. Yes. During her doctorate, she trained well-fed mothers to work as social workers and to measure the results of this process. She had these surveys that and I had tally sheets. I was 8 years old. I had tally sheets, and they surveys were handwritten in cursive. I couldn't read cursive, but I could read my numbers and my letters. And Mom taught me to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So tallying up those survey responses was my contribution to Mom's doctoral thesis. During this time, I think she was somewhat frustrated with her committee because she made a sculpture. It has sort of a cat's head, the blockish body, and the hands are here. But in the middle, where the tummy should be, there is this huge hole. It's tenure. She's smug and she's gutless. I now have my own copy of tenure in my room, which I asked her to make for me when I worked on my own doctorate. And up into her 70s, 80s, Mom was traveling around the world. We traveled together. My father died about 10 years ago, and eventually Mom took a couple of falls, just enough. It's like, all right, time to come home. But what was funny was I was at a conference and I was catching people up on my life. Oh, yeah, my mom took a fall and I came home so I could be with her. But don't worry, she's in Bhutan right now. She was out trekking in Bhutan at the age of, 80 something. This takes us all the way up to February 19th of this year, 92 years old. And that morning she got up and she did her 1.6 miles through a hill yet again. But when you're caring for an aging parent, there's that midnight call, the one you really don't want to get. Cynthia, I've fallen and I can't get up. Oh, Christ. So called 911, of course, spent a horrific night in the ER, beeping, pinging, blooping, plinging, blopping, bloopy, right? And indeed, she had broken her hip and they had to do surgery. So the night after surgery, I was at home. I got that midnight call. Cynthia, I need you to know what's going on. There are these women here. They've been helping me. They won't let me out of my bed. And even as I was having the conversation with her, I was thinking of all the people who've had this conversation with their parents. Mom, listen, Mom, you're in the hospital. Yeah, the hospital. Yeah, look to your right. See those lights? No, Mommy, you're not at home. You're in the hospital. You broke your hip, Mommy. Mom, I need you to do something really, really brave for me. This is going to be really hard. Can you do it? Can you give the ladies your cell phone? It's going to be all right, Mom. I'm going to see you in the morning. Give the ladies your cell phone, will you? She did. I got a night's sleep. Physically, she recovered quite well. She moved into Piedmont Gardens to recover. There was another midnight call that I missed because they were calling my cell phone, which I never use. She's fallen again. Spent another night in the ER. And I had to go to a meeting at church on Monday. I was actually chairing this meeting and I was completely freaking out because she had fallen twice. She was denying it. And we were waiting for a babysitter to come and stay with her all night because somebody had to watch her and keep her from getting out of bed. And during the time I was at this meeting, my husband was with Mom and he left the room for 2 minutes. And she managed to hit the deck again. And this is this time when you think, oh God, is she ever coming back? Well, she did. On March 15th, the day of the lockdown, we moved her back home. That babysitter turned out to be awesome. She is now Mom's 24-hour caregiver. And Mom is now walking the better part of a mile a day through the hills with a walker She can walk all the way up to my house. By the way, I'm at the top of that old 200-foot climb. I bought this house because it was on her running route. And by God, Mommy, go!
Wow, Cynthia, tell me mom's name.
Dorothea Cutterback, Dot.
Go, Dorothy. Dorothea.
It would be go Dot. Yeah, I'm really proud of her. She's still
I
sort
thought
of,
you were going to ask, this is going to be really hard, Mom. And I didn't know what you were going to ask her that was going to be really hard. I thought you were going to ask her. I was relieved when I heard the cell phone, but I could understand why it was hard. I thought you were going to ask her to tell her to listen to you, and you were going to tell her I love you, or somehow get her to tell you she loved you. But wow, it's a very energy filled, motion filled tale. Um, all I could think of was that connector trail up behind Strawberry, when you
yeah,
want to get up to the.
it's similar to that. We're in Oakland. We're near the Redwood Gate of the Skyline Gate of Redwood Park. That was her running route.
Oh gosh, thanks, Cynthia.
Thank
That's
you for
something.
listening.
And thanks for waiting earlier for us. And I'm sorry I made trouble for the coughing thing, but you could pretty much got through it. Yay! Okay, moving along. Can we see a show of hands who wants to go next? It's Bobby and Marion and me. Okay. Cool.
Unmute.
Take
This
it
is
away, Bobby.
thank you. This is a warrior story. It's not, I don't tell personal stories. They're a little too close for me, but I like to tell kind of analogies, and this goes with my damsels overcome. It's a Chinese tale, and I was so glad to find this person. Her name's Lychee. Leech is her first name, and of course, Lee is the last name. She's a dragon slayer. Okay, a long time ago, just after the black dragon died, he's the one that did wonderful things in China. He made the script down to 50,000, and he made the axles the same size and the rows the same size, and the money was all standardized. So he did, and they loved him, but the different dynasties came in and they were fighting. Well, Lychee lived on a farm with 5 other sisters. She had no brothers, and she lived with her father, and she would help in the fields. On this particular day, she was up with her sisters working in the rice field. It was on a hill, it's dry ricing. And here came this sorceress of the town, all dressed in silks, and they were pulling a cart with the magistrate, all dressed in silks, and their fine shoes. And her mother and father and her oldest sister was waiting, and they pulled up and stopped, and they bowed and they bowed, and then the father put in 10 bags of rice. At this point, Leech couldn't stand it anymore, and she says, "I'll slay that worm." For years, she had been a victim, and all the girls in the village, of this worm that had moved into the tower upstairs, up the hill, way up the hill. And he would come down and he would eat goats and pigs, and sometimes he'd eat a magistrate or two. And so they were afraid of him. And just after that, sorceress came in and she said, "You know what would calm this filling down, this worm? You know he's 80 meters long, and he's got a mouthful of teeth, and his eyes are huge, and he's as fat as a big barrel." She said, "You know what would appease him is if each year on the 10th day of the 8th month, he was given a maiden. And to get out of this, you're going to have to give us bags of rice to have your daughters." Well, this really made Lychee and her family very scared. Well, the next 3 sisters had to go visit aunts because the drought came. The water dragon and the earth dragon weren't favorable to them. And in the meantime, Lychee went down to her father and she says, "Dad, may I do the dance in the field with you?" He said, No, that's just for men." Her mother was standing by and she says, "Look, you have no son, and she'd be a great company for you. You need somebody like that." So she was allowed to go into the fields and practice there. The war dances they do that we call Tai Chi. And she got pretty good at it. Well, it came to the 4th sister, and they had enough grains And that, by this time, it was up to 9 bags of grain. And then the 5th sister was 10 bags of grain. And then Lychee was just turning 12 when it was her turn. And her mother said, would you go clean up the bags and the rice, get ready to put the rice in? And so when Lychee was cleaning it up, she found this sword. And she said, oh, Dad's sword. So she'd get up early in the morning and she'd lunge and she'd sit and then she'd pound and then she'd stab and she'd lunge. And her mother one day came in and she said, the rats sure are big this year. They're eating all the rice bags up. And Lychee didn't say anything. But she'd get up early every morning, do her practice with the sword, and then go out and do her defense dancing with her father. Well, it came for her time. And they were all sitting down having dinner. And she stood up, she bowed, and she says, I am going to face the worm. And her dad rolled his eyes and he stood up and he said, no daughter of mine faces the worm. She says, Dad, we have no money. I can gather the reward for us and everything will be good. He said, no, tomorrow I take you over to your aunt's. Well, Lychee wasn't going to have any part of this. So she went upstairs. She put on her rugged, dirty clothes, her worst boots. Her sisters all came in and they said, Lychee, we understand. Don't do this. She says, I am going to kill that worm. And they said, okay. So she went down way to the end of the village where the sorcerer lived, and she knocked on the door and she says, who calls this late? She says, it's Lychee. She said, what do you want? She said, I came for my award. I want it given to my father. She said, what? She says, I'm going to give myself to the worm. And she said, oh yeah. And she says, what else do you want? She said, I want some honey. I want some rice. I want a pot. And I want a flint stick. And I want some fancy boots and a fancy dress. And the snake, the dog that catches the snakes. And she said, okay, let me think about it. So she put Lychee into a bedroom. And while Lychee was in there, she prayed to all the dragons, the earth dragon, the fire dragon, the water dragon, the sky dragons, and the black dragon. And she said, please help me and please protect me. Well, the next day she heard growling and barking and she heard the lock unlock her door. And there was the snake-eating dog in their village after the sorceress. And she went over and pet it. And the magistrate was there and he says, here's your rice. It was moldy. And here's your honey. It was all honeyed, sugared. And he says, here's a flintstone, it was broken. And but this is the pot. Of course it was rusty and it was cracked. And so she said, thank you. He says, you get no boots and you get no dresses, just be wasted on you. And she says, remember the reward goes to my father and my family. So she wrapped it up. She'd taken her bedcloth just in case, and she had her sword. And so the sorceress said, I'll come along with you. And Lychee said, no, you're not coming with me. So she hiked up, and as she hiked up, she picked up sticks and stuck them in. And pretty soon it got slimy, and they could smell this horrible odor. And they got closer and up, and they came to this temple. It had 4 pillars. It had a roof once upon a time, and it had a flat floor made of brick. And the stench was horrible. It smelled like sour beef and rancid fat, and there were bones everywhere. And they went in, and there was this creature. It was in a cave, and it was out, and it didn't have big fish eyes. They were just normal eyes, and it didn't have thousands of teeth. It had 20, and it was about half the size of a barrel, and it was about 30 meters long. And it was snoring. It was asleep. And so Lychee squatted down, and the dog squatted down very carefully. And she started laying her sticks out just very silently, and the dog was just crouched waiting. And then she put the pot down, put the honey in it, put the rice in, and started a fire. And then it started, the flames and that honey, you could smell the honey. And the worm woke up and he went for it. And when he went for it, the dog jumped on him, and Lychee had her sword ready, and she swiped him once for herself, and she swiped him again for his sister, and she punched for another sister, another. And then she beat him up some more, and the poor worm just kind of turned over, just went, had no more breath, and it was dead. And the dog and her just kind of looked at each other, and she sat there till the flames of the fire completely went out and ash. And she said, you know what, we need to pick these bones up and take them back to the village for the farmers. So that's what they did. They gathered all the bones. The dog just kind of watched her. And they went down the hill. And when they passed the sorcerer's house, she wasn't there anymore. And they went on down, and it was evening, and her father was very surprised to see her and her family. They all ran out and hugged her. And she bowed to her dad, and she says, we need to take these bones to the city. It's the bones of their daughters. And so they went to the city and they pounded on the gong, and it sounded, and the farmers all came in. That was their clue that something was happening. And the villagers came, and Lychee said, here's the bones of your daughters. And they were very, very thankful because they could bury them now and there would be peace. And pretty soon the small dynasty emperor came, and I think it was the Qin dynasty. And he came and he gave rewards to the father, and he gave dowries to all the sisters so they could be married. And he turned to Lychee and he said, would you be one of my queens? And she says, no, 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 I'll help my father. I'll help him. And that's what he gave her some gold coins. And he says, well, here. So she took the gold coins, and later on she married a farmer in another village, and they lived happily ever after. Well, in China, a song is still sung about Lychee and how she was this famous warrior that took care of demons that lived up in the temples. And click, clack, clack, this tale is out. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you.
Oh gosh, Bobby. Am I up? Can you hear me? Thank you,
Yeah,
Bobby.
you're welcome.
Wow. Talk about we shall overcome. Damsels do it best. You really put damsels in a light that needs to shine, and it does it with you. And you've even got graphics.
That is the page for the title. It's the title page. That's what you see back there. I
Damsels
could put it
overcome.
I could put it up here, but it'd take a while. It's got
But this is
different.
beautiful for a cover. I'm surprised you didn't say cover.
That's what I meant. It's a cover
Oh,
and
okay.
title page. It's just
Gorgeous. Whose art? Whose art?
I did it in Canvas. I cheated. You know what Canvas is? It's a place where you can do designs. I have a free thing, and I went and I chose all these different types of ladies for all the different stories. And there's a goat and there's a chicken because they have their stories too in here. So anyway, it's getting ready to be an ebook. If anybody wants to read it, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. How we doing on time, folks? It's 8:22. What I wanted, I don't know about you, Marion. I have a story that I would like not to end with, and if I might go next, we'll go that route. Just and my apologies for repeats. There's at least one person, possibly two, who have heard this already, but I'm hoping my version has improved. There was a very This story is from Zanzibar, and it is called Habdani, who was very poor. Habdani had nothing. He had a house, but he had no money. He had no food. He barely had clothes. Habdani would go around to people's homes and he would ask for food. And sometimes Habdani would take things without asking first. And the people stopped giving him food. And so Habdani stopped going to the homes and he went back to the village dump, and there he would scrap and scrape around for what he could find, usually millet and not much else. But one day Habdani did find a dime, and he put it in his pocket, and he said, well, I'm set now. And he went back home and took a nap. The next day he does the same thing. He goes back to the dust heap and he's scrapping and scraping about. But further in the way, he sees a countryman coming along with a basket of twigs. And Hamdani calls out to him and he says, hey there, what do you have in that basket of twigs? And right then, three gentlemen who were nearby, well off people, Well, they said, don't bother with Habdani. He doesn't have 1 cent. He couldn't get anything that you are selling because he doesn't even have 1 cent. Habdani says, I don't mind by that. And Habdani came over and he showed Habdani that he had a basket of gazelles. And Habdani saw the gazelles and he said, oh, and the merchant picked out the smallest gazelle and he held it up. And Habdani is looking at the gazelle and he says, may I have that gazelle for 1 dime? And the merchant agreed. The merchant said, here then, and this is your gazelle. I call this gazelle Kajipa. And Habdani took Kajipa home with him and went back to his life that was going in and scraping at the dust heap. And at the end of the day, they would go home together, and Habdani and Kajipa slept in the same room. Well, this went on for 4 or 5 days, but by the 6th day, Habdani was asleep but was woken up by a sound. Hello there! And Habdani startled, and he said, who is there? It is me. And Habdani didn't know to faint away or to run for the door. Who'd ever heard of a gazelle who could talk? Oh, says the gazelle, there are many more wonderful things than that. But I have something I must tell you. And Habdani said, I will listen to every word. And Kajipa explained how this might be fine for Hadami to go out the way he does, but for me it is not enough. If this keeps up, you will not have a gazelle. And I want to, but now you are my master, and I want to ask you that I be able to go out every day and forage for myself, and I will come back every night. And Hadami says, of course, I feel I can't say anything other than yes. And the next day, that's exactly what Kajipa did. And he went out and he found all sorts of foods for him to eat, and he was much happier. And of course, he came back at night. And on the second day, he went out, and while Kajipa was underneath a tree, scraping amongst the grasses, his eyes spy an immense, bright diamond. And immediately he realized that this is property worth a kingdom. I must not give it to Hadami. He is so poor, he will be killed. And Kajipa determines to take it to someone more powerful and makes his way into the city. And he goes through the towns and he makes it to the Sultan's house. And when he gets to the gate, he sees the Sultan there at the door, sitting outside. And Kajipa says, good day to you, sir. And the Sultan says back, may God make it so. And Kajipa has placed his package. He had wrapped the diamond in green leaves at his feet, and he's sat down the way gazelles sit down, and he approaches the Sultan by in words with, I am here to make you I don't know what you are going to think of this, but I am offering you to perhaps arrange for a family alliance. And the Sultan says, that's exactly what I've been thinking is about a family alliance. Um, tell me. And that is when Kajipa takes the wrapped diamond in the green leaves and places it in the lap of the Sultan, who unwraps it. And when he sees what's inside, he says, oh my. And Kajipa says, that is from my master, Sultan Darara, who has heard that you have a daughter. And the Sultan immediately said, I have a daughter, and it's exactly how I was thinking about a family alliance. Tell your master he needs bring nothing more than himself. And with this, Kajipa heads back and he tells his master that they are going to take a trip into the city and that we're going to go via the river where his master can bathe. And at the end of the bath, they head toward the forest. And when they're in the thick part of the forest on their way to the city, Kajipa has his master lie down. And Kajipa beats his master. And he tells his master he must stay still and stay there. And that he will be back for him not before long. And then when Kajipa makes it back to the Sultan's palace, he says, the Sultan says, "Hello, how are you?" And Kajipa says, "Do not even ask. It was terrible." And Kajipa makes up a story about how they were beaten and robbed of everything, including the Sultan's clothes. And immediately the Sultan calls for his assistants who come and they bear things that Kajipa can do to make amends. And including a walking cane, including a horse. And so Kajipa takes his leave and goes back to the forest and shows his master what he has done and what good news he has. And so his master dresses in this finery and uses the walking cane and even rides the horse, alternating. And they make their way back to the Sultan's palace, where the Sultan and the daughter are married and they are given things. And Kajipa explains how he will go into the forest now. And the Sultan was immensely happy with being left with this new young bride. But in the forest, Kajipa is thinking, how is it that Master never asked me how I was able to give him so many things, or how it came about? How is it that the Master has not thanked me for helping him that way? And Kajipa started to feel ill about all of this, and he went up to a house in the forest and he told the old woman who was living there that he felt very weak and hungry and sad, and that could she go to his master's house and ask for food. And she does. But the master, when he heard about this, offered her a bowl of gruel, and that is all. And when the woman took it to Kajipa, Kajipa was so disappointed he couldn't even eat the gruel. And he says to the woman, "Please go back and tell him it is Kajipa, and 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 he needs more." And when the woman tells this to Hadami, he goes into a bit of a rage. He says, "What is this Kajipa asking me for now? I bought him for one dime, and he is asking me for more." When Hadami's wife hears this, she says to him, "How can you talk like this?" But Hadami dispatches the woman, and meanwhile, the wife, she says to Hadami, "A wife is to consult her husband, but a husband is to consult the wife, and the both will be better for it. What is wrong with you?" And he says, "What is wrong with you? How is it you speak to me like this?" And the wife somehow manages to get some rice and a pillow to lie on to Kajipa. And the old woman had gone to Kajipa too, but it was too late. For meanwhile, Kajipa has died from sorrow. And the wife writes a letter to her father, the Sultan, and explains that she wants him to come immediately, which of course he does. And once he arrives, he finds out that Kajipa has died and that Hadami has thrown Kajipa's body into the well. And the Sultan has his assistants pull Kajipa up from out of the well. And the Sultan has Kajipa buried. And that night, the daughter dreams that she is back in her own home, in her own bed. And in the morning, when she awakes, that is exactly where she is. And that night, Hadami dreams that he is back at the dust heap, scraping for bits of millet. And when Hadami awakes, that is exactly where he is. And the tale ends with the following sentence, with a semicolon. It ends, it says, if this story be good, it belongs to all of us. If this story is bad, it belongs to he who told it. The end. I am still I am still very much working out how this ends. It's sending me to philosophers all over the place and religious people, and it hasn't sent me to the Bible yet. But thank you for listening. Is there still time now for Marion to tell us a tale?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm saying that. All right.
Um,
Getting my points ready. Okay. Time we smell fermenting apples, and the leaves are falling and changing colors. And quail is collecting seeds to hold for the winter. She is winnowing the seeds, just as the Indians do. She pecks all around the grounds and pecks at the seeds and puts them in a winnowing basket. It's just as the Indians do. It's a round basket. And she shakes it back and forth and tosses the seeds in the air, and the shape blows away in the wind, and the the kernels of the seeds fall down into that basket, and she has gathered them. She gathers more seeds, and she's putting them into the winnowing basket and tossing them in the air, but she cuts her foot. On that sharp grass. It cut and hurt so hard. You know how you have that little paper cut? It stings. It stung on her foot. Kiroo, Kiroo, Kiroo. Nearby, Coyote heard that song and said, I love that little song. I must have that song for my little ones. It will lull them to sleep just as a lullaby. I love that song. I shall find who is singing that song. And he scampered through the weeds and found Quail. She was still holding her foot and crying, Kiroo, Kiroo. Quail, I love that song. It's a wonderful song for my little ones. Teach that to me. Coyote, that is not a song. See my foot cut here? I was crying it. Do you think that I am such a fool that I cannot tell the difference between singing and crying? Teach me that song. She did. Kiroo, Kiroo, Kiroo. I have it. Thank you for teaching me that song. And he went off bounding across the fields. And Quail, holding her round basket, goes back to putting more in and winnowing those seeds. Coyote just went bounding across that field so fast he didn't look where he was going, and he nearly fell into a prairie dog hole. Oh my God. He tumbled back and over, and he dropped the song. He looked around for the pieces. Keep. That will never do to sing my little ones to sleep. I shall go back and find Quail and have her teach me that song again. So he did. He came back a little more carefully, and Quail, I fell into a prairie dog hole. Oh, and I dropped the song. I can only find Quail. Do teach me that song again. Coyote, that was not a song. Quail, I love that song. Teach it to me, or I will eat you up. She did not want that, so of course she taught him the song. Kiroo, 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 kiroo. Oh, thank you, Quail. Thank you. Oh, I should hold on to that song. And off he went across the fields, holding the song in his mouth. She resumed her winnowing. But again, Coyote got a bit excited and was bounding across, and he heard, "Sss." It was a snake. Oh, he had to jump out of the way, and as he jumped and fell back, he dropped that song. Oh, goodness, I must have her teach that to me again. And he came back to where she was. Quail, the snake, it almost got me. But, I'm okay. I know you're worried about me, but I'm okay. But I've dropped the song, Quail, and teach it to me again. Coyote, that was not... Quail, if you don't teach that song to me, I am going to eat you. And he bared his teeth, and she could smell that breath of his that was from his sour insides. Ugh. She taught him the song. Kiroo, 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 kiroo. Thank you, Quail, thank you. Oh, I should be more careful. And off he went to his den. Quail was just frustrated, exasperated. I am getting nothing done here. What I need to do is go yonder. Oh, I need to go yonder and finish my winnowing over there. But, before I go, here's a rock. Oh, it's my size. And she put a rock down, and she got some berries and pressed them out and got some red paint and painted it, and some other nuts and got some brown paint and painted it. It looked like a bit like a quail and was her size. She put it where she had been and had an extra winnowing basket. Put some seeds in it and placed that winnowing basket right by it, and then she went yonder to finish her winnowing. Meanwhile, there was Coyote. He was almost home. Oh, he was joyous again, and he just had one more gully to leap over, and he leapt over it, but unbeknownst to him, down in the weeds of that gully were two mourning doves. And if you were a mourning dove and something was flying over you, what would you do? Of course, you would fly up. And that disturbed him, and he tumbled down again to the bottom of that gully, and you guessed it, he dropped that song. Oh my gosh, that will never do. I shall go back. He came back to Quail and saw. He thought that was Quail. Quail, teach me that song. Oh, I nearly broke my back. Oh, I know. Oh, you're worried about me, but I'm okay. I'm okay, I assure you, but I need that song again. Quail didn't respond. Quail, teach me that song. No response. Quail, I am going to count to 4. And if you don't sing by the end of 4, I am going to eat you up. Still no response. So he started counting. A 1, a 2, 3, 4. And he chomped on that quail. It was not really a quail, it was really a rock. And his teeth. Oh, he fell back and cried and held his jaw. The sound of that went across the field this way. And over there was Lizard sunning himself, and Lizard, oh, I love that little song. I listened to that song for my little one. Let me find out who's telling it, singing it. And he came down to Coyote. Oh, Coyote, I love that song. Coyote had had enough. That was it. Oh, it is not my fault. It is Quail. It's all her fault. She just sang this song and then she's not here. And I have had enough of all of you, and I am coming after you, Lizard. And he went after Lizard, but Chomp, he had no more teeth. No more teeth. And Lizard just skidded right out behind that and went back to his sunny spot. Coyote had to just hang his head and mope on home, for today he lost not only his teeth, but he lost the song that was never a song. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. And my audio is on. I have another story, not for tonight, but if I promise to you out loud, then that'll make me learn it again.
What's the story?
It's called The Great Fish by Peter Parnell, and I just really like it. It's I just enjoy the story so much, and I haven't told it for a lot of years, so I'll be relearning it, but it does take some time. So I'll commit to you folks for December.
Ooh,
The only glitch is I'm getting a new computer in December, and I hope it's not on the days that I'm out of commission.
well, it sounds like a fish tale and not a fishing tale.
It's an Indian story. So the chief tells the story to his grandson, and it's about the environment and how the world has changed. And I just really like that story.
Well, it goes well with our new vice president also. Good timing, Marion. I didn't say that.
Okay, so yeah, let's wrap up. We've had a good evening here. Good.
Thank you, both of you. All of you.
I wish I had good news.
Thank you for the stories.
I wish I had good news.
Unmute all. There. We've done our part.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Well, thank you all
Thank
of
you
you.
all tellers. That was great.
I
Yes.
want to tell you that I have not talked to Kate for over a month, and I am having the hardest time getting through. So I hope I have better news in December.
That's good. I hope so too. I
Good.
was going to ask you about her.
It's gotten harder and harder to get through at Belmont Village, and I have to obviously try harder. The phones aren't working, landline or
See,
cell.
Kate has to come to me to help her get on. So yeah, she needs a helper to get her on. And it's easier during the day than at night. There's not that many extra helpers.
But I've stopped even trying about stories. I'm just worried about connecting with her at all.
Yeah.
So I will give another report next month.
Good.
Oh,
It's been, I've been busy, but anyway, onwards we go. So thank you all very much. I hope to see you again, and I hope it's within a month.
Yes, thank you.
And
Woohoo.
remember all the celebrations that are going on this whole week. Go to
Yeah.
Storytelling Association of California. There are 4 or 5 paired storytellings happening. I think one's tomorrow night, and then on Friday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
it's not tomorrow night. So my celebration is right here, Thursday, November 19th. Thursday is
Thursday.
mine. And so go to the SAC website to register. So that's Thursday. Then on Saturday is at 3:30, and he's with San Diego. He's Sacramento with San Diego. And 7 o'clock is South Bay. They have Michael McCarty from Southern California as their key teller. So that's 7 o'clock at night. And then Sunday is Mother Lode and community storytellers. So 1, 2, 3. So you got 4 more. You've missed Tuesday night. We had a great time, and you've got 4 more chances to come to Celebration. See you there. I'm going to be at all of them.
One other,
Thank you, Marion.
Yours was Tuesday, Marion? Yours was Tuesday night?
My Delta Word Weavers is Thursday. There
Okay.
was one.
Okay.
You missed the do tell swap.
That was last Tuesday,
That was a week
November
ago.
10th.
Oh my gosh, it was a whole week ago. Yeah, on the
Yeah.
10th. But you can go to the SAC website, to the YouTube channels, and watch it.